This is Liverpool, the hometown of the Beatles, but it also once served as the home port for one of the most well-known ships in history, the Titanic. Join us as we show you the locations that are so strongly associated with the Titanic, as well as the forgotten graves of those who perished aboard the ship. The White Star Line, the company that owned the Titanic, had its headquarters in this building, 30 James Street, and it was likely in this very room in 1912 that the White Star Line received unexpected news. The Titanic had sank into the Atlantic Ocean. The White Star Line staff shouted the names of the deceased down to the waiting audience from these balconies, each name being met with cries and shouting, for fear of being attacked or overwhelmed by the waiting family outside. Walking around 30 James Street, you can really get a sense of the atmosphere and the history of this magnificent building. It was up these steps that Captain Smith would walk to receive his fateful orders from the White Star Line that he was to captain Titanic. Below the building are the vaults, where the luggage and ship stores would be kept before being taken the short journey over to the waiting liners on the River Mersey. We'll now take you to some of the graves of those whose names were called down on that cold spring morning. Beginning here in the stunning Toxteth Cemetery, we'll begin today by taking you to the top of the cemetery to see the burial of Robert Spencer Allen, a first-class bedroom steward who was portrayed by Richard Fox in James Cameron's Titanic film and who, at least in the film, died under horrible circumstances. Robert, who was born in Liverpool in 1876, was married and the father of 3 kids when he boarded the Titanic for that fateful voyage. After relocating there with his wife following the birth of their most recent child, Robert gave Southampton as his address when he boarded Titanic. The Olympic, a sister ship to the Titanic, had been his previous vessel. Robert earned £3.15 a month as a first-class bedroom steward, one of the most prized jobs amongst the stewards. Robert died after falling 90 feet while attempting to cling to the ship's rails as she began to rise at a 90-degree angle. His grip gave way and he was last seen plunging to his death, hitting a capstan. Later, his wife and kids received aid from the Titanic Relief Fund and returned to their hometown of Liverpool. May they rest in peace. We will proceed over to our second grave of the day. This is the grave of Gilbert Balfour, a Marconi radio operator who has the sad distinction of being one of the very few men who spoke to Titanic as she was sinking. When the Titanic sent out a distress call at 12:27 a.m, indicating that it had struck an iceberg, Balfour was on board the RMS Baltic, around 250 miles away. It wasn't until 12:42 a.m. that the Baltic received the distress call. Struck iceberg, require immediate assistance. Immediately, Gilbert tried to call Titanic, but was not answered. Balfour replied at 1:37 a.m. and said that the RMS Baltic was on their way, undergoing a near 8-hour detour to try and help the stricken Titanic. Gilbert Balfour assured Titanic that they were coming to their assistance, but this was to no avail. The RMS Baltic was simply too far away. The final message received from Titanic was around 1:45 a.m, saying, "Come as quickly as possible, old man. Our engine room is filling up to the boilers." This was likely when the dynamo in the engine room was flooded on Titanic, rendering further communication impossible. After that, Gilbert Balfour simply stood by, listening to all messages in the faint hope that there would be further news from Titanic. Sadly, there was none. Gilbert died in Liverpool in 1923 at the relatively young age of 47. May he rest in peace. William Edward Farqhuarson was born in Liverpool, England in 1873 and was a second engineer aboard the Titanic. William joined the White Star Line in 1900 as an assistant second engineer aboard the Titanic, later holding the rank of senior second engineer aboard both the Titanic and the Oceanic. William was stood by the Titanic during the latter stages of her construction at Hartland and Wolff Shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland. When he signed onto the ship on 6th of April 1912, he and his family had moved to Southampton. As a senior second engineer, he could expect to earn monthly wages of around £22. William Farqhuarson died in the sinking. His body, if recovered, was never identified. His wife and children were later assisted by the Titanic Relief Fund. He left behind 3 children and a widow, Martha, who never remarried and relocated to her native Liverpool, dying there on the 13th of February 1934. May they rest in peace. Our final grave of today is that of the only passenger we will feature in this episode, Alfred Rowe of Texas, USA. Only a few families were able to afford the costs involved in recovering the remains of their loved ones. And many of the persons who died on board the Titanic were never found. Alfred Rowe was a first-class passenger aboard Titanic and was travelling from the UK to the US aboard Titanic in order to get to the ranch that he owned in Texas. Alfred boarded Titanic at Southampton on the 10th of April 1912 as a first-class passenger, ticket number 113790, £26, 11 shillings. And he was making his usual trip to Texas. He was lost in the sinking and his body, if recovered, was never identified. Accounts at this time suggested that after sinking, he swam to a piece of ice where he was later found frozen to death. However, the body was simply picked up, like so many others, by the cable ship Mackay Bennett. In a cruel twist of fate, Alfred had sent a telegram home to his wife saying that he feared the ship was going to sink. It was too big, and that it was a positive danger after a near miss with the SS New York while docked in Southampton. 7 months after Alfred's death, his wife gave birth to a baby boy and named him after his father, Alfred. May he rest in peace. That concludes the first of our Titanic specials, and we hope you have enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notify button so you can be alerted whenever we publish a new video.